Thank you, Chairman, for your leadership today and for your interest in and leadership on this issue, and also for your team. I'm grateful for the way our teams have worked together in advance of this. I'm grateful to the four of you, the three in person and Matt Pottinger by Zoom. Look forward to continuing to learn from you. All four of your opening statements and the submitted materials were incredibly useful. We should be very clear-eyed about why we're here today. We're here today for a broad range of reasons, but we're also here for a very particular reason, which is the Chinese Communist Party's leader, Chairman Xi. The CCP fundamentally rejects the idea of universal human rights. They reject it for Americans, they reject it for their neighbors, and they reject it fundamentally for their own citizens. They reject self-government, and in recent years, other tyrants around the globe, following Xi's example, have looked to the Chinese Communist Party for how they might protect a techno-totalitarian state. In practice, this means reestablishing the Communist Party's role in the most minute details, not only of national life, but of private life. Achieving that level of control requires lots and lots of data. And in China's Xinjiang province, the CCP's techno-totalitarian state is at its zenith. The government has a DNA profile of every Xinjiang resident. Authorities use facial recognition, iris scanners, traffic cameras, transaction records, and financial information to persistently track the population and identify suspicious individuals. The result is repression on a vast scale, and it is genocide in Xinjiang. More than 1 million Chinese Uyghurs, a predominantly Muslim ethnic minority, are detained in camps in Xinjiang without any legal recourse. The party euphemistically calls these camps vocational training centers, but escaped prisoners testify to torture, sexual abuse, forced sterilization, organ harvesting, and forced pledges of loyalty to the state. The network of camps is part of the CCP's network of gulags, where the CCP detains political dissidents, journalists, lawyers, religious believers, and other folks that have been deemed inconvenient to the regime. Elsewhere in China, a network of surveillance tools target tens of millions of what are called key individuals, synthesizing billions of data points from financial information to exchanges on popular messaging services like WeChat. Individuals are flagged for purported antisocial behavior, including minor offenses like failing to pay a traffic fine or trying to take a lighter through airport security. The PRC has also begun to turn its surveillance state outward by, on the one hand, selling its surveillance tech to other autocratic leaders around the globe, and on the other hand, siphoning off enormous amounts of data from free nations like ours through a coordinated campaign of data collection. The prime target of that campaign abroad is the United States and our citizens. We should be absolutely clear about this fact. There is no such thing as a private company in China. American C-suites want to lie to themselves and delude themselves about it, thinking the collective action problem will be solved sometime later after they've made a lot more money and exited their firms. But there are no private companies in China. The Chinese-owned hardware and software through the national security law have backdoors for the government, and they pose a threat. TikTok all but invites the CCP to spy on Americans, while Huawei sells spyware on the party's behalf. PRC cyber attacks have targeted everything from federal employees' security clearances in the U.S. through OPM forms, to credit reports, to Equifax, to passport and travel information from Marriott hotels. All told, the U.S. government now estimates that 80% of Americans have their personal data stolen by PRC hackers. Think about that. 80% of Americans have personal information stolen by hackers working on behalf of the Chinese government. We heard yesterday, as the chairman mentioned, from a whistleblower at Twitter that a Chinese spy was employed, maybe multiple Chinese spies inside Twitter, that could have easily gotten access to the massive pot of data inside that company, including location and private messaging of any Twitter user. And if we're being honest, we simply have no idea the scale or scope of the data that the CCP may have licensed or bought through commercial data markets or from data brokers. They can use data to map dissidents and identify support networks with the brutal aim of silencing any opponent of the CCP. The CCP can use data about Americans to hunt down spies and intelligence assets, to attempt to coerce, blackmail, and extort government, military, and intelligence officials, and to spread lies and propaganda among the American public. We have already seen the PRC flex its repressive muscles outside of its borders, including in the United States. As just one example, Roy Jones, a Nebraskan, a native of Omaha who worked for Marriott, was fired after he liked a tweet from the Friends of Tibet account. This firing by Marriott was done on behalf of the CCP. We also know that this data matters for U.S. national security and economic competitiveness. Critical and emerging technologies like AI, autonomous systems, and biotech are heavily reliant, heavily data dependent, and the CCP matches a strategic vision with an enormous influx of cash to try to win the tech race. In response, the U.S., as the chairman has said, has been playing whack-a-mole, blocking an acquisition here, sanctioning a particularly dangerous Chinese spyware company there. But in the meantime, TikTok's U.S. market share keeps growing. Twitter has spies internally, according to yesterday's full Judiciary Committee meeting, and the average American has absolutely no idea what the CCP might be building about them in terms of a data profile. Administrations, the last one and this one, mealy-mouthed promises don't cut it. We need real action, and the Congress needs to be involved. At the same time, it's important to remember why the U.S. has protected the free flow of information across national borders in so many cases, because open data flows between the U.S. and our allies and partners around the globe have been critical to economic growth and innovation in the American and the American-led Western economies around the world. Having American technology companies at the helm of the global internet has been a boon to U.S. national security and to the American people. So one thing I hope that we can all agree on today is that the challenge that the Chinese Communist Party presents is not simply political or economic or military. It is, at the extreme, civilizational. We're not in a struggle with the 1.4 billion Chinese people. In fact, we fight on behalf of the overwhelming majority of them. 1.4 billion people in that country are made in the image of God, and this is not us versus them. It is everybody who believes in dignity against the small handful of inner ring tyrants that support Chairman Xi. We should admit this, regardless of whether or not U.S. politicians or business leaders want to, and that is that we are faced with a century-defining challenge in our long-term technology race with the Chinese Communist Party. Chairman Xi aims to advance a new model, a new view of human dignity or the lack thereof, and a new model of governance. That model is not only different from the free world, it is fatal to the free world's vision of universal human dignity. We should recognize this, square up to it, and one of the fundamental steps to do that is take data flows more seriously, and I applaud the chairman for his leadership today.